The most dangerous monster in the Odyssey is not the Cyclops. It is not Scylla. It is not Poseidon. It is the war Odysseus carries home inside him. Christopher Nolan's film is built around a contradiction. Odysseus survives because he can transform objects into lies, people into pieces on a board, and impossible situations into strategies. But that intelligence also lets him rename cruelty as necessity and mistake survival for innocence. This is not simply a story about reaching Ithaca. It is about whether home can still recognize the man who returns. Nolan explores that question through every level of filmmaking: the IMAX frame that reduces warriors beneath cliffs and storms, nonlinear editing that shows consequences before causes, sound that turns gods and monsters into physical pressure, and performances shaped by exhaustion, hesitation, and guilt. It is also a complicated adaptation. Nolan gives Homer's epic modern psychological force. He turns divine punishment into trauma, mythology into religious horror, and homecoming into a confrontation with time. But in making the ancient world easier to understand, he sometimes makes it less strange. Gods vanish, famous acts of cunning are removed, monsters become symbols before they become characters. So we are not only explaining the story, we are examining what Nolan changes, what those changes achieve, and what they sacrifice. This is More Studio, and from here forward there are full spoilers. Before meeting the monsters, we must understand the man who once tried to avoid becoming a hero at all.
The story begins in a world that is not yet a unified Greece, but a network of independent kingdoms connected by language, trade, marriage, religion, rivalry, and fragile promises. Mycenae, Sparta, Pylos, Argos, and Ithaca are separate powers. Troy stands across the Aegean, near roots linking different commercial worlds. In that system, Helen's marriage is political. Every rejected suitor could become an enemy. According to later mythic tradition, Odysseus advises King Tyndareus to make them swear an oath. Whoever Helen chooses, the others must defend the marriage. It's classic Odysseus. He prevents an immediate war by inventing a system, while negotiating his own marriage to Penelope. But when Paris takes Helen to Troy, the system becomes a machine. The oath designed to prevent violence now demands it. Odysseus tries to escape. He has a wife, a newborn son, and a small island kingdom. The Iliad credits him with only 12 ships, far fewer than Agamemnon. His power is not size, it is persuasion. The tradition says he pretends to be insane, plowing in a meaningless pattern. When infant Telemachus is placed before the plow, Odysseus turns aside and exposes the performance. The master of deception is defeated because love makes the lie impossible. This makes Nolan's character more tragic. Odysseus does not leave as a natural conqueror. He leaves trapped by the promise his own intelligence helped create. 10 years later, the reluctant soldier has become the architect of Troy's destruction. The man who designed the oath became its prisoner. The man who tried to avoid war learned how to win it. And Homer, long before Nolan, knew that the consequences should not be told in a straight line.
The nonlinear structure may seem uniquely Nolan, but Homer's Odyssey already begins in the middle, with Odysseus absent, the suitors consuming his home, Telemachus searching for answers, and much of the voyage later reconstructed through memory and testimony. Nolan radicalizes that design. Jennifer Lame's editing moves among the legendary strategist, the damaged stranger with Calypso, and the absent father imagined by his family. Images connect through emotion rather than calendar time. Troy arrives already contaminated by its consequences. That creates power, but also distance. The crowded opening asks us to absorb bloodlines, disguises, gods, alliances, and multiple periods before relationships have settled. Confusion sometimes lets us share Odysseus's instability. Other times it delays emotional clarity. Then the timelines converge on the perfect image of his mind, the Trojan Horse: object, idea, lie, and weapon. Nolan's production built a massive practical horse, roughly 8,000 pounds, moved through real sand and surf by hundreds of performers. Its weight matters. The legend scrapes, sinks, strains, and threatens the bodies hidden inside it. The camera then forces the vast IMAX image into a cramped wooden interior. Men sweat against one another. Breath becomes dangerous. Every movement could expose them. Spectacle becomes analysis. Outside stands Sinon, drawn not directly from Homer's Odyssey, but from the wider Trojan tradition, especially Virgil's Aeneid. He is human evidence sacrificed to make the fiction believable. Here, the film's moral argument becomes clear. Odysseus saves the coalition by deciding who can be spent. The method will return with Scylla and inside his palace. Hide violence inside familiarity, control the exits, control the story. To themselves, the Greeks are heroes. To the civilizations they destroy, they resemble the terrifying people arriving from the sea. History remembers who opened Troy's gates. The dead remember what entered through them.
For a Bronze Age sailor, open water is not empty space. There is no compass, no accurate map, no forecast. Ships remain near coastlines because losing sight of land can mean losing the known world. A storm can carry a crew hundreds of kilometers from its route. That vulnerability gives the IMAX scale a dramatic purpose. At Troy, Odysseus controls architecture and information. At sea, there are no walls to manipulate. The ocean cannot be persuaded. In Homer, Poseidon gives that hostility intention. Nolan largely removes the visible gods. Poseidon is invoked, Zeus remains an idea, and Athena is reframed through the face of a murdered priestess haunting Odysseus. The choice is powerful, but costly. A storm can be weather, divine punishment, or guilt interpreting chaos as judgment. Myth becomes religious horror. Yet Homer's gods were not merely explanations for nature. They represented a universe ruled by jealous, erotic, political, protective, and cruel powers. Removing them makes the story psychologically legible while reducing its ancient strangeness. Nolan's true god is memory. Calypso offers relief from it. The film removes Nausicaa, expands Calypso, and uses Lotus to cloud Odysseus's past. For once, he need not be king, husband, father, commander, survivor, or author of catastrophe. But comfort requires erasure. Calypso can release him from guilt only by weakening Ithaca, Penelope, Telemachus, and the dead. This is one of the film's strongest modernizations. Trauma is not a memory that can be simply deleted. It is a moral relationship with the past. It is moving, but safer than Homer. The immortal mystery becomes a recognizable story about sedation and avoidance. Odysseus chooses memory, mortality, and the family capable of judging him. But remembering does not make him wise. It returns him to the need for every enemy to know his name.
The Cyclops sequence is the film's clearest demonstration of physical scale. Polyphemus is treated as mass, a hand large enough to hold a man, a mouth that turns soldiers into food, and a body that transforms the cave into an anatomy. His sound occupies the theater like pressure. The practical environment and giant presence give the nightmare weight. Odysseus studies the routine, identifies weakness, and engineers escape. Intelligence succeeds where strength cannot. His men reach safety. The danger is over. Then he turns back and attacks again. Because survival is insufficient, the monster must understand who defeated him. Matt Damon plays the moment as compulsion rather than heroic confidence. But this is also where the adaptation has a serious weakness. In Homer, Odysseus tells Polyphemus that his name is nobody. When the blinded Cyclops calls for help and says nobody is hurting him, the others leave. Only after escaping does Odysseus reveal himself, allowing Polyphemus to call on Poseidon. Nolan removes most of that verbal duel. His Cyclops is largely voiceless, and the famous trick disappears. The gain is terror. The loss is character. Without the wordplay, Odysseus's defining intelligence becomes less visible. His final attack can look less like pride corrupting genius and more like bad judgment following a straightforward escape. The scene is stronger as horror than as an adaptation of cunning. Intelligence gets him out of the cave. Pride sends violence back inside it. From this point, Nolan organizes the voyage around one thesis. Every monster externalizes something already present in the men. That idea gives the journey unity. It also risks making the world feel designed only to explain Odysseus.
Circe transforms soldiers into animals, but the film suggests conquest has already taught them to live through appetite. They enter foreign spaces expecting food, bodies, and hospitality to belong to them. Transformation only makes their condition visible. The Sirens offer something different, not desire alone, but surrender. Their song promises an end to command, memory, and explanation. Odysseus need not reach home or answer for the dead. He only has to disappear beautifully. Scylla turns leadership into arithmetic. Sacrifice a few so the rest survive. It is the calculation Odysseus has made since Troy, now given teeth. The commander calls it necessity. The selected men experience abandonment. Then the starving crew kills the sacred cattle of Helios. Odysseus taught his followers that necessity can justify violation. Eventually, they use the principle without his permission. A leader's logic becomes most dangerous when others learn to apply it themselves. This symbolic design is one of the film's greatest strengths. The voyage becomes a moral anatomy rather than disconnected adventures. But the control can be too perfect. Circe, the Sirens, and Scylla are unforgettable images, yet not always given enough time to become personalities, cultures, or mysteries before being converted into psychology. Homer's world feels larger than its hero. Nolan's world often feels engineered around him. By the time the ship is destroyed, Odysseus has survived gods, monsters, and nature while losing every man who followed him. That is not uncomplicated heroism. It is survival with a body count. And while he fights monsters at sea, Penelope fights an occupation inside her home.
The suitors are not simply competing for Penelope, they're a political occupation. Odysseus has been absent for 20 years, 10 at Troy and nearly 10 at sea. Ithaca has no confirmed king, no body to bury, and no stable transfer of power. Telemachus is old enough to become dangerous, but not secure enough to rule. Marriage to Penelope offers legitimacy. That is why every meal matters. The suitors consume Odysseus's cattle, drink his wine, abuse servants, threaten his son, and convert hospitality into economic destruction. The ancient law of Xenia binds host and guest. The host protects the vulnerable stranger. The guest does not exploit the home. Any powerless traveler might even be a god in disguise. The suitors violate both sides. They enter as guests, behave as owners, and humiliate a beggar because they mistake poverty for powerlessness. Robert Pattinson's Antinous understands the palace as a stage. He need not wear the crown yet. He only needs everyone to behave as though the future belongs to him. Anne Hathaway's Penelope fights through administration, performance, delay, and survival. Every day she balances grief, desire, political pressure, her son's safety, and the danger that hope itself has become destructive. The film gives her conflict dignity, but not always equal space. We understand that waiting is labor, yet Odysseus's trauma still dominates the emotional architecture. Homer's recognition test uses the secret of a marriage bed built around a living olive tree, private knowledge linking husband, wife, home, and permanence. Nolan replaces it with an object tied to Athena and guilt. The change is consistent with his themes, but shifts the reunion away from shared domestic memory and back toward war. Even in Ithaca, Troy remains at the center. And Telemachus has spent his life beneath its shadow.
Telemachus has never known his father as a person. He knows him as public property, king, strategist, destroyer of Troy, and story repeated by veterans, enemies, servants, and a mother forced to preserve hope. Tom Holland plays him between boyhood and authority. If Odysseus is dead, Telemachus must become king. If he is alive, the son must discover whether there is room beside the legend. Eumaeus offers the film's alternative definition of strength, not the absence of fear, but the ability to feel fear without letting it choose what kind of man you become. That challenges a heroic culture built around conquest, control, and hidden weakness. Can the son inherit responsibility without inheriting the wound? His storyline is necessary but compressed. Fear, masculinity, legitimacy, and inherited violence are present, while some emotional turns arrive faster than the development supporting them. This question of children living beneath enormous stories connects to what we are building at More Studio. We are developing a Persian historical fantasy series inspired by the Shahnameh, a world of kings, warriors, love, betrayal, monsters, and inheritance. Modern fantasy did not invent these structures. Epics such as the Odyssey and the Shahnameh carried them across centuries before Game of Thrones or The Lord of the Rings brought epic worlds to modern screens. If you believe Persian legends deserve a cinematic world of their own, subscribe and join us as we build it. Telemachus spends the film searching for the man beneath the myth. But the first creature to recognize that man asks for no proof. Odysseus enters Ithaca aged, thin, bearded, and disguised. His family sees a stranger. Argos knows immediately. The dog recognizes no king, warrior, or legend, only the person. And that private recognition makes the public violence that follows even more disturbing.
Argos confirms the private human being. The bow restores the public myth. The suitors can hold the weapon, but cannot command it. They want Odysseus's palace, wife, wealth, and authority without possessing the discipline and history encoded in the object. When the beggar strings it, memory becomes evidence. Then revelation becomes a trap. The massacre repeats the Trojan Horse on a smaller stage. Odysseus hides in plain sight. His enemies mistake harmless appearance for safety. Exits and weapons are controlled before anyone understands the design. Only now the war is inside his home. The sequence is cathartic because the suitors are violent usurpers who exploited sacred hospitality and threatened Telemachus. It is disturbing because Odysseus does not return as a peaceful king delivering measured justice. He returns as the most efficient product of 20 years of war. The editing moves between tactical clarity and overwhelming impact. At its best, every action feels inevitable, like a mechanism completing the pattern established at Troy. At other moments, speed and fragmentation risk turning moral horror into momentum. Telemachus fights beside his father and proves he is no longer powerless. But his initiation to adulthood occurs through the same violence that damaged Odysseus. The victory saves the son while threatening to reproduce the father. Recognition is not restoration. A body can return to a house. A life cannot return to the moment before it was broken. Did Odysseus remove war from Ithaca, or did he finally bring it home? The hero and monster are no longer standing on opposite sides of the frame. They are holding the same bow.
The ending changes the entire journey. Odysseus imagined Ithaca as a fixed point preserved for his return, but time crossed the island as violently as war crossed him. Penelope is no longer the woman he left. Telemachus is no longer the infant before the plow. Argos grew old. The kingdom learned to survive without its king. Odysseus can outthink armies, escape monsters, and endure the sea. He cannot defeat time. Nolan's final departure from Homer belongs more to his own cinema than the poem. Telemachus accepts the throne. Odysseus and Penelope leave together. The voyage may be literal, or an image of death, memory, and release. Either way, home is no longer a location recovered intact. It is a relationship chosen after illusion ends. The sea changes too. Earlier it represents punishment, separation, and lost control. In the final sail, they enter uncertainty voluntarily. The sea is not safer. They no longer demand safety as the condition of living. This is why the technical scale matters. Shot entirely with IMAX film cameras, Hoyt van Hoytema's images do not only enlarge ships and landscapes, the frame that makes cliffs overwhelming also studies exhaustion in Matt Damon, calculation behind Anne Hathaway's restraint, fear in Tom Holland, and predatory confidence in Robert Pattinson. Ludwig Göransson combines ancient colors with gongs, struck metal, and industrial sound. The score does not recreate the past, it excavates and rebuilds it. The film is not flawless. Its opening is crowded. Some modern dialogue and vocal rhythms break the spell. Nonlinear editing occasionally creates distance. Removing the gods reduces Homer's cosmic strangeness. The Cyclops gains terror but loses cunning. Penelope and Telemachus need more space. Several monsters work better as metaphors than characters. Yet the achievement is enormous. Nolan transforms a foundational epic into an anti-war story about guilt, memory, leadership, masculinity, and returning changed. The true punishment is not being unable to reach home. It is reaching home and discovering that neither you nor home remain still. For more studio, The Odyssey is an extraordinary cinematic experience and an imperfect adaptation, which is exactly why it deserves argument. Tell us which change worked and which part of Homer you wanted preserved, the gods, the nobody trick,
Penelope's bed test, or the original ending? Some stories end when the hero reaches shore. The greatest begin asking their hardest questions after he arrives.